All right, y'all. Welcome to number 54, second part of our series here on Priya Vedanta. I'm pretty much just going to pick up where I left off, connect the pieces when and where I have to. Hopefully, I can remember. Because being a complete metaphysics and philosophy, it gets pretty intricate once you put the whole skeleton up. It's kind of hard to remember what you've talked about, what you haven't, but let's go ahead and just delve in. We did 1 through 5 last video and covered some of the symbolism and kind of like where we're going with this. But here we go. Verse 6. Now, from uncharted depths, whispers arise, drawn upwards by native magnetism toward the light of the first thought. As they arise, like attracts like, developing identity, coalescing into shape and form, entity. Now, this verse, I mentioned in the last video that, like in the Bible, where when God creates, like, plants and animals or whatever, it says, that each species kept to itself. And this is sort of in reference to that. I'm building on this general idea that things that are similar have a tendency to coalesce together, like water always pools into oceans and lakes and whatnot. The idea here is that there's this natural pool of information. So if you took anything that can be known, and you chopped up into a million pieces, fragments, and you dumped it into a pool, that there's going to be this natural kind of swirl to it. And information that is similar to one another will naturally kind of migrate towards themselves. Now, this is sort of a hint at the Tao, that there's this natural force that makes life happen. It's again, I'm using the fact that we live in a mirror of source, that if we have a nature here, it's a pretty safe assumption that there's probably a nature on the other side or in the reflection, and that this nature itself is why bits of information coalesce. Now, again, remember, we say in line 1, all of this is unknowable on the other side. We are rats in a maze attempting to figure out why the maze was built and what the maze means. And why are we rats stuck in a maze? Let's see, magnetism. Yeah, so I'm saying there's a natural process that these things just naturally drift towards one another. And once they get large enough, they begin to form an identity. And once that identity is solidified, so to speak, it'll become a being, an entity. It becomes a force unto itself. Think of like things like the classic gods of the emotions, gods of war and love and hate and fear and all these things. But it's also, as you'll see later on, that this is everything from like the idea of like flight or speed or gravity or magnetism, your own thoughts, your emotions, your drives. All of these things naturally coalesce and kind of form their own identity. Let's move on to 7. As each entity crosses the center stage of the first thought's gaze and limelight glory shines upon them, they burst open, their core bared by the moment's joy, unfolding into godly form. We call these the lesser gods. So further expanding on this idea, these entities are lesser gods. Well, some of them. And what makes them unfold is attention. And at this point, attention doesn't actually exist until the next sentence or two. But this idea that just having awareness upon you, being bathed in that light, creates this circuit that just warms you, and that joy that overflows, it just makes you become what you could be. You unfold, you become, like a little kid who just needs, mommy, or daddy, watch me on the swing or whatever. That the awareness upon you just makes it more real, it gives you, the lesser God powers, kind of, so to speak. 8. Now, who was the first among them to take center stage? Surely it should have been the fraternal twins, desire and loneliness. But the gravity of the moment fell most fiercely upon the strangest, most ethereal of beings, and as it hurled itself on the stage with reckless primal vigor, it split in two. The limelight hesitated, uncertain which to illuminate. The cherished light teetered, paused, then settled upon one. Thus the first two lesser gods came to be, the limelight drunkard attention, and its chilling clone, the shadow. So up here at 8, I'm making a counter argument to something I had come across pretty early in my research. And I was curious what other schools of thought believed was the reason for existence. And one of the best speeches I ever saw, or lectures or whatever, was a rabbi who was saying that God desired for Earth to exist. And his argument was pretty good. And I'm like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I was leaning towards that. It was actually and is still there as the driving force for the reason for creation. But the more I thought about it, I realized that it really is this power of attention that kind of like creates the circuitry, if you will. You can't build the construction if you don't have the energy and the power and the tools to do it. And it's this attention and the shadow that actually give you that capability. Say it all the time. Attention is the currency of our reality. So here it is, enshrined right there in the very, very front of the book. And again, chapter 1, Pleroma, is largely my mythical layout of the metaphysics. Not necessarily the philosophy, but the metaphysics. The philosophy is going to be built throughout the rest of the 5 books. And let's see, the limelight. So the limelight at this point is really the first thought, who was the vibration that created this spillover, this beginnings of what I would call the ether. It's the thing that flows, that allows creation to become. And again, we're imagining early before creation. And another thing that we're hinting at here isn't just the creation of, or the emanation of our existence, but what we're also talking about here is this is our own consciousness. The first thought is our mind. And we have all of these drives and desires and thoughts that just kind of pop up into our minds. And it's like these things crave our attention. And when you pay attention to them, they can take over. Literally can drive your life if you give into these things. And so a large part of what we're going to be talking about in this chapter is that we're talking about human consciousness as a direct reflection of how the universe works. Again, the metaphysics is we live in a mirror of reality. the divine mirror. We are a reflection. Actually, I like to think of it as we're in a toroidal field that's like a fractal of original source. So we're exactly the same as source, just that we're, in a way, we're sort of we're isolated to prevent the contamination of source. But the energy that flows through is experienced and returns to source. So source gets to like filter through our experiences and sort of pick and choose, I suppose, in a way, what it's going to choose to keep. But we'll get into that later. The shadow. And of course, this is Carl Jung. What I'm arguing here is our reality is made up of the things that we pay attention to and the things that we don't. These are like the two meta factors that drive our reality. And they are the clones that energize what will become the emanation of existence. And so it is. This birthing of lesser gods, entities reaching outward from the eternal, beckoning to blossom before the first thought. Relentlessly, emotions yearn, memories ache, thoughts seek, and questions cry out. Needs, wants, desires, drives, and desire desperately flow towards the light. So this is the stage. This is your mind. This is here you are. You're in this blissful state, trying to be aware of your existence, and yet you will have this never-ending stream of entities that will clamor for your attention, be they from the outside or from the inside. It's never going to stop. As each lesser god leaves the stage and the treasured warmth of the limelight fades from their simple-minded memory, warmth is replaced by chilling whispers from within. See me. And this is one of the reasons why I call them lesser gods and entities. Because we genuinely don't have control over our own thoughts or our emotions. Rage and hate and love and desire can take over your being. And they want back into that, into the attention. It's almost, it's chemical, it's biological, it's physics. It's the nature of this place. These aren't just... They require our attention. And Gnostic Vedanta, if you haven't, I haven't quite stated it completely, but they're not you. Every one of these things, like I said, they're lesser gods. So in this world, you have a lot of people that talk about their feelings and how they feel or what they want in their life, or, the things that they desire, or all of these things. Or, they'll talk about the, what's the... all the cool kids, what do they have today? They got they got trauma, I'm making it explicitly clear, none of these things are you. These are things that desire you to pay attention to them so that you will claim them as you. This is our world, and they will never stop. But understand they are not you. You are the one that aims the spotlight of attention. What's on stage is not you. Driven by need, the lesser gods naturally center their culture around access to the stage. And each lesser god learns to identify and cultivate their unique ability to maximize their stage time. The strong power their way forward while the agile navigate gracefully through the crowd. The cunning distort perception and slip by unnoticed, and in the end, all will lie, cheat, or steal to ensure they fulfill their need. And this is the way it is. Some emotions and drives, like say hunger will power its way through. If your avatar is crying out for food, that sucker's going to plow its way to the stage and it will take center stage. Some people, if you say certain words or phrases, they'll be triggered, or like certain political figures will trigger an emotional response that is so powerful it'll drive its way to the stage. Now you have to understand, we're talking about the theater of the mind, the stage. That's what we're talking about here. And your attention is watching. Your reality is the theater of your mind. You cultivate this, whatever you're paying attention to in your life. If you're, whatever, doesn't matter. But these things can, and like, the cunning ones will slip by, they'll distort your reality. So you think you've tricked everyone into whatever, and you're actually just being manipulated. We'll get into this a little bit more. But yes, in the end, your traumas, your emotions, your drives, they will lie, cheat, and steal for attention. Then there are the manipulators and facilitators, the enablers and the desperate, the lesser gods of craft. They surrender their fame to feed their need for attention. Starring roles, supporting roles, extras, cast, or crew. Each is driven by unscrupulous desire to belong, to feel important. Now, what I'm hinting at here is more of a social, cultural kind of a thing, using Hollywood as the metaphor, obviously. But, you do have people in this world and even emotions and thoughts that'll hang on to other ones. And so it's like, if you have a fear of something, fear could, kind of steer you towards that thing to stimulate your fear. You're being manipulated by it. And then there's people in this world who, they know they don't have the strength or the cunning or the agility. So, they sort of find the centers of, power in society, and they try and embed themselves there. And, being the guy that holds the camera, or the guy that, does the lights, or the guy that runs and gets the coffee, these people feel important because here they are, they're the center of the world, they're the center of the stage, and they may not be the one on the stage, but, they get to be there. They get to feel that glowing warmth, They may not get to be like the politician in Washington, but maybe they work in the office, or, maybe the guy who he's like, I fix all the copiers, for all the, the senators down there, feels pretty important. This sort of thing. So these entities not only affect the stage of your reality, they affect the stage of this place. And this is the way lesser gods interact with us. These are entities that cohabitate with us in this reality. So it's not just your mind; it's the world itself. So that's what I'm hinting at here. Well, maybe not quite hinting, but yeah. And let us never forget, some never return to the light, be they too weak, too slow, or simply not enough. They descend into the shadow, the limelight forgotten or hated. There they mutate and give birth in the dark light to the malformed, twisted horrors that cry out in nightmare, repressed by the limelight. This is definitely a warning to be careful about what you repress, or what we allow society to repress. You have these horrible human beings who, the story of like Cain and Abel. Cain was entertaining these thoughts and allowed them to take over to the point where he became murderous. A lot of this, again, I got a lot of these ideas from watching like Jordan Peterson talking about Carl Jung and whatnot. But in this specifically, I was thinking about the Columbine shooters and how they entertained this hatred of being itself, which is really what the shadow is. It's the opposite of attention. And so it's like, I assume at some point in time they craved attention and they didn't get it. So they went to the other side and decided they were going to mutate and generate something to bring fear and hatred, whatever they were feeling, jealousy and whatnot, and manifest that in the world. So, like I said, the lesser gods are not just within you. It is the whole construction of reality itself. And again, reality is not, we call it real, but it's not. We live in a reflection. We live in a toroidal fractal of something that is real. We're at 22 minutes. Yeah, let's go ahead and get into the war. Some stars shine brighter than others. Envy fuels the lesser gods, so they whine, complain, and bicker, sometimes wrestle to get their precious moments on the stage. So this is sort of talking about like before, you have all these ones who figured out their abilities to get on stage or figured out other ways to manipulate those around them to get their fair share, their wanted, desired attention. Then you have those that slip into the shadow. But even no matter which way you go and where you are, there's always going to be others there, and some people are just going to be better at it. Even if you choose some crazy alternative route, you're going to have competition. And, people are going to start whining and complaining. The weaker gods feel cheated, 22 here, and refuse to accept the status quo. So they band together like with like, using their numbers to overwhelm the others. And here we are again, we're using this like for like, this natural proclivity of people to want to be surrounded by others that are like themselves. Information wanting to be around other information that is similar to itself. Animals and plants wanting to keep to their own species, kind of a thing. We keep repeating this to show that it's a deep natural pattern that's apparent. When we step back and view reality, you see the same pattern repeating itself. To stay relevant, the powerful relinquish their sovereignty and join with others like themselves, trading freedom for influence. And this is what you're beginning to see now, when the balance begins to tip, and the lessers or other groups become too large. Perhaps you were like some superstar or something, and whatever it is, but you're going to get drowned out by all these other larger groups. So you're going to have to give up your freedom if you want to maintain this attention on the stage of reality, or whichever stage you're performing upon. And they'll trade that just to have a little bit of influence, just to stay relevant. You see this with like aging musicians and whatnot, and movie stars, and you see like, and football people and sports stars. to stay relevant, they go into broadcasting or start a podcast or something. Anything to keep that attention by gaining influence. And on it goes. Groups converge with groups, and wrestling becomes battles. Groups swell into armies, and battles ignite into war. Angels versus demons. Now, as you can see, we're starting to take a kind of a twist here where we're going to change directions in the story. Sort of laid out the groundwork of, lesser gods, attention, stages of reality. But you see, I'm introducing another concept that you see in the Bible, and that's this tit for tat escalation kind of a thing that you see in the story of Lamech. And I'm laying it out early, saying this is a fundamental part of reality, this game theory sort of tit for tat kind of a thing. And angels and demons, I wanted to introduce and keep these words. They're relevant in this space in metaphysics and philosophy. And so I'm going to utilize them. And the way I'm using them here is angels are entities that serve the purpose of whatever creation is, meaning these are, it's entities that serve good. And we have a definition of good and evil in Gnostic Vedanta. So good is that which nourishes, and evil is that which poisons. So there's no judgment on angels and demons. There's if they are serving the nourishing of reality, then they're angels, and if they are the opposite, if they're poisoning reality, they're demons. And many entities are both. I have to say every one of them are both. So just because they're at this stage on one side or another, but I just wanted to keep something familiar to anchor it into historical and culturally relevant stories. Where am I at? 28 minutes. Let's go ahead and end it there. I think we've gone through the various stages, be it the world stage or the stage of your mind, the stage that we're sort of speculating that exists within Source itself, and that this story is about what happened within the consciousness of Source, but this is a direct reflection of of our own mental struggles in dealing with the consciousness that we live with on a day-to-day basis. This story is about humans and being human. It's not about Source. Trying to figure out who we are, where we are, why we're here, and how do we live a better life. This is what we're meditating upon. Remember, attention is the currency of this reality. With that, I will see you on the next one, my friends.